Long before modern psychology quantified anxiety and depression, before Nietzsche declared God dead, and before existentialism named the absurd, two voices, one Eastern and one Western, had already confronted a darker truth. Suffering is not an exception, it is the rule. For Gautama Buddha and Arthur Schopenhauer, suffering is not a bug in the system, it is the system. In Buddhism, the diagnosis is direct. Life is dukkha. Restlessness, dissatisfaction, pain, not just physical suffering, but a deeper existential unease that threads through even our moments of pleasure. This suffering, Buddhism claims, is rooted in craving, ignorance, and impermanence. Schopenhauer, working centuries later in Germany, arrived at a strikingly similar conclusion. For him, the human condition is driven by an insatiable will, a blind, striving force that can never be satisfied. Desire breeds suffering. Fulfillment is brief, boredom soon follows. Thus, to exist is to want, and to want is to suffer. But these are not nihilistic doctrines. They are diagnoses, offered in the hope that understanding might liberate. Both systems seek not just to name suffering, but to transcend it. So we ask, is suffering the default state of being? And if it is, what then? Do we endure, resist, transcend, or transform it? In the conversation between Buddhist wisdom and Schopenhauerian pessimism, we glimpse two paths through the darkness, both brutally honest, both quietly redemptive. The first noble truth, life as dukkha Buddhism, begins not with salvation, but with suffering. The first noble truth declares that dukkha, often translated as suffering, unsatisfactoriness, or stress, is the basic condition of human existence. It is not merely the pain of illness or loss. It is the quiet discontent beneath even our happiest moments. It is the impermanence of joy, the anxiety behind desire, the inevitability of decay. This framing is radical. Rather than assuming life is good unless something goes wrong, Buddhism suggests that suffering is the default and moments of peace are the exception. From birth to death, we cling to things that are always slipping away: youth, status, relationships, health. The mind, always chasing or resisting, rarely rests. But this is not a pessimistic doctrine. It is diagnostic. Like a doctor confronting an illness, the Buddha insists we must first see suffering clearly if we are to transcend it. Denial only deepens the wound. Clarity begins the healing. Unlike Western traditions that often moralize suffering as punishment, tests, or sin, Buddhism treats it as a natural consequence of our delusions and craving. We suffer because we mistake the impermanent for the permanent, the empty for the essential. Dukkha is not a flaw in the system, it is the system, as long as the mind remains entangled in desire and ignorance. By naming it up front, Buddhism offers a brutal kind of honesty and a glimmer of hope. For if suffering has a cause, it might also have an end. To accept this truth is not to give up. It is to begin. The will to suffer, Schopenhauer's metaphysics of misery. For Arthur Schopenhauer, suffering is not incidental. It is ontological. It stems from the very engine of existence, the blind, irrational force he calls the will. This will is not a conscious agent, but a metaphysical drive to live, to strive, to persist. And it infects all things. In humans, it manifests as endless desire, and because desire is never satisfied for long, suffering becomes inevitable. Schopenhauer's view is not merely psychological, it is cosmic. The will underlies all of nature, propelling everything forward with no goal, no rest, no fulfillment. We are its victims, compelled to chase illusions of happiness, money, love, fame, only to find emptiness or new cravings waiting on the other side. Pleasure, for Schopenhauer, is not the opposite of pain. It is a brief interlude from it. Once a desire is fulfilled, boredom takes its place. The will demands constant movement, and thus we are condemned to chase shadows until we die. This is where his bleakness deepens. To exist is to suffer. The very structure of being ensures dissatisfaction. There is no redemption through history, no salvation through reason or progress. The only hope lies in rare moments of transcendence, through art, compassion, or renunciation. Schopenhauer's pessimism is often mistaken for despair. But it is, in its own way, a call for honesty. He strips away illusions and comforts, confronting us with the raw truth. We are not rational masters of our world. We are driven, aching creatures, haunted by the will. And yet, by seeing the will clearly, we take the first step toward loosening its grip. Craving and clinging, the root of all dukkha. According to Buddhism, the cause of suffering is not the world, but the way we relate to it. The second noble truth identifies the root of dukkha as tanha, craving, thirst, attachment. We suffer not because life is inherently cruel, but because we insist it must satisfy our desires. Craving takes many forms. We long for pleasure, permanence, identity, recognition. We cling to people, possessions, ideas of self. Yet everything we grasp is impermanent. The body ages, relationships shift, emotions fade, and when reality fails to match our expectations, we feel betrayed, even though the betrayal was only our delusion. But there is a deeper twist. We not only crave pleasure, we crave the avoidance of pain, and thus we resist what is. We build an inner war against change, loss, aging, and death. In this resistance, suffering multiplies. The Buddha's insight is radical. To end suffering, we must loosen the grip, not suppress desire, but see through it, not destroy the world, but meet it without illusion. Schopenhauer echoes this insight from a Western angle. Desire, he claims, is the source of misery. Fulfillment brings only brief relief. The rest is yearning or boredom. To cling is to be ruled, and the more we attach, the more we suffer. Both traditions agree. Liberation begins with detachment, not nihilism, not apathy, but a clear seeing, a letting go of what cannot last and what never truly satisfies. To live well is not to cling harder, but to release gently. Pleasure's hollow? Victory. Why fulfillment always fades. Pleasure feels like the opposite of suffering. But for both Buddhism and Schopenhauer, it is only a mask. Momentary, fragile, and deceptive. Pleasure does not liberate. It lures us back into the cycle of desire. The Buddha saw pleasure not as evil, but as dangerous. It seduces the mind, reinforces craving, and binds us to the wheel of samsara, the endless round of birth, death, and rebirth. Each joy becomes a seed of future suffering, for we fear its loss, we want more, and we build identity around it. Schopenhauer sharpens the critique. Pleasure is not a positive force, it is merely the temporary absence of pain. Desire causes agitation, fulfillment brings a sigh of relief, but only for a moment. Then comes boredom, and with it a new desire. The self is never at peace. Its satisfaction is always a flicker, quickly extinguished. This is the hollow victory. We chase happiness, and sometimes catch it, only to find it dissolving in our hands. What we wanted is not what we thought, or what we have soon fails to satisfy. Worse, we confuse these pleasures with meaning. We build lives around fleeting highs and wonder why emptiness follows. The promise of joy becomes the trap. But neither tradition condemns all joy. Rather, they question its depth. Is it rooted in freedom or in compulsion? Does it liberate or tighten the chain? True peace, they suggest, lies not in chasing more, but in stepping off the wheel. Joy that does not depend on grasping, that is rare. That is real. Pleasure isn't the enemy, but it isn't the answer either. Desire, boredom, and the restless self? Desire drives us forward, but what happens when we get what we want? Schopenhauer offers a bleak answer: boredom. And in that boredom we begin the chase again. Thus human life oscillates between two poles, wanting and emptiness, striving and stagnation. The will, Schopenhauer argues, is a blind impulse. It moves without goal, without rest. When we lack what we crave, we suffer. When we attain it, we are briefly satisfied, but then quickly disillusioned. The silence of fulfilled desire is not peace. It is boredom. The recognition that we still want something, though we don't know. This cycle is not a flaw in human nature, it is human nature, and it dooms us to restlessness. The self, caught in this loop, is never settled. We are always becoming, never being, always reaching, never arriving. Buddhism echoes this diagnosis. Craving, tanha, is not just about what we lack, it is about our refusal to be present. We leap from thought to thought, pleasure to pleasure, fear to fear, anything to avoid the stillness of now. Boredom, in Buddhist terms, is not a lack of stimulation, but a lack of awareness. It arises when the mind is disconnected from reality. Both traditions suggest that our normal state is not peace, but agitation. We are afraid of what we truly are, because we are trained to want rather than be. To escape this restlessness is not to fulfill all desires, but to understand their futility, to step back, to observe the wanting mind, and perhaps, in that space, to glimpse a deeper stillness. Desire seeks, boredom waits, but awareness watches and is the quiet escape. Buddhist detachment and the end of suffering. In Buddhism, freedom does not come from indulgence, nor from denial, but from understanding. The path to liberation begins by seeing the root of suffering, tanha, the thirst for pleasure, permanence, and self. The solution is not to conquer the world, but to change our relationship to it. This is the quiet escape, not an exit from life, but a transformation of how we live it. The Buddha's Eightfold Path offers a way forward: right view, right intention, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. These are not commandments but tools, guides for aligning mind and body with truth. At its heart lies detachment, not indifference, but clarity. It is the ability to hold life lightly, to enjoy without clinging, to grieve without collapsing, to act without being owned by outcome. Mindfulness plays a central role. Through meditation and awareness, we begin to see how thoughts arise and pass, how craving arises and passes. This observation loosens the grip of compulsion. Desire loses its urgency. The mind finds stillness not by suppressing the world, but by ceasing to chase it. Renunciation, too, is not rejection, but refinement. Letting go of what does not serve peace, shedding illusions of control, ego, and permanence. The goal is nirvana, not a place, but a state. The extinguishing of the fires of craving, not annihilation, but release. This path is quiet because it moves inward. It does not demand drama or conquest. It asks only this: can you stop grasping? Can you meet life with an open hand? That is where suffering ends, not an escape, but an awakening. The aesthetic answer: art and music as relief from the will. For Schopenhauer, existence is suffering because it is driven by the ceaseless, irrational force of the will. But he did not leave us in despair. He offered brief moments of rescue through aesthetic experience. In art, especially music, Schopenhauer saw a rare silence in the mind's machinery. When we lose ourselves in beauty, we cease to strive. We no longer want, compare, or judge. The will is momentarily quieted. We become pure perceivers, free from desire and self-concern. This is why music holds a unique power. Unlike other arts, it does not represent the world. It expresses the will directly. Yet paradoxically, in listening, we are lifted above it. We feel deeply, but we are not attached. We are moved, but not restless. Visual art too allows this transcendence. A painting, a sculpture, a landscape, when fully seen, invites a contemplative stillness. We are drawn into the object without needing to possess. We see without wanting, and in that seeing we escape. This momentary escape does not fix life, but it gives us a taste of freedom, a glimpse of a mode of being beyond striving. For Schopenhauer, the artist is not just a decorator of life, but a liberator, one who shows us what it means to be fully present. In this, Schopenhauer anticipates aspects of Buddhist mindfulness, an invitation to stillness, to detachment, to freedom from grasping. Art cannot end suffering, but it can interrupt it. And in that interruption, we may remember that peace is possible, not by changing the world, but by stepping outside the will, even for a moment. Beauty is not a luxury, it is a lifeline. The compassionate eye, seeing all beings in pain. Both Buddhism and Schopenhauer arrive at a startling convergence. To live is to suffer. But from this grim premise, they draw a surprisingly redemptive conclusion: compassion. For Buddhism, the realization of dukkha in all beings leads not to despair, but to empathy. When we see that others are caught in the same cycle of craving and impermanence, we respond not with judgment, but with care. The practice of karuna, compassion, becomes essential, not as sentimentality, but as wisdom in action. Schopenhauer echoes this. Although his worldview is famously bleak, his ethics are grounded in pity, mitleid. He argues that genuine morality arises when we see through the illusion of separateness and recognize the suffering of others as our own. The veil of individuality lifts, and we act with kindness, not out of duty, but identification. This compassionate eye changes how we live. We become less harsh, less possessive, less indifferent. We no longer see others as competitors in a game of survival, but as fellow sufferers, fellow seekers of peace. Such compassion is not weakness, it is strength born of insight. To see suffering clearly and still choose gentleness is the mark of spiritual maturity. Modern life often encourages the opposite: distraction, competition, isolation. But Buddhism and Schopenhauer invite us to look again, to face suffering in ourselves and others without flinching. In doing so, they transform suffering into a bridge, not something to hoard or dramatize, but to understand and share. To suffer is human. To suffer with, that is divine. Non-being is mercy. Is existence itself the problem? When life is viewed as suffering, the question inevitably arises: would non-existence be better? For Schopenhauer, the answer leans toward yes. He does not advocate suicide. He sees it as a reassertion of the will. But he does suggest that not being born would be the ultimate mercy. Existence driven by endless desire guarantees suffering. To exist is to lack, and thus to not exist is to be free. Buddhism takes a subtler route to a similar insight. While it does not preach annihilation, it sees liberation, nirvana, as the cessation of craving, the end of becoming. The self is not eternal, it is a process, and the ultimate peace lies not in more life, but in the stilling of the forces that bind us to rebirth. In both views, non-being is not feared, it is relief, a release from the endless cycle of craving, grasping, becoming, a quiet extinguishing of the fire. Of course, this offends modern sensibilities. Our cultures are obsessed with legacy, longevity, and the meaning of life. But both traditions offer a stark counterpoint. What if the highest state is not more doing, but the end of striving altogether? This does not glorify death, it invites reflection on what kind of being is worth pursuing. If life is nothing but restlessness, is sheer survival the goal? Perhaps the real question is not whether life is good, but whether wanting life endlessly is wise. To imagine non-being as peace is not morbid, it is metaphysical clarity, a confrontation with the ultimate silence, and perhaps the ultimate mercy. Liberation or resignation, choosing how to face a suffering world. Buddhism and Schopenhauer agree on one thing: life is suffering, but their responses diverge. Liberation versus resignation. Buddhism sees suffering as real, but not final. It offers a path, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Way. Through ethical living, mindfulness, and wisdom, one can loosen the grip of craving, dissolve the illusion of self, and attain nirvana. This is not a heavenly reward, it is the end of unnecessary suffering. Not a denial of life, but a transformation of how we experience it. Schopenhauer, on the other hand, offers no structured path. He accepts the suffering, but finds no ultimate redemption. He advises asceticism, aesthetic contemplation, and compassion, but holds no illusion that these will abolish suffering. His clarity is cold, but honest. We cannot defeat the will, we can only mute it. So, is Buddhism more hopeful? Perhaps. It believes in awakening, however rare. Schopenhauer believes only in dimming the fire, never extinguishing it. But the difference is not only doctrinal, it is existential. One invites active engagement with suffering, the other a kind of dignified withdrawal. One believes change is possible, the other sees endurance as the deepest wisdom. And yet, both are united in their call to see clearly, to face life without illusion, to respond not with denial, but depth. Whether you walk the Buddhist path or adopt Schopenhauer's gaze, the question remains, how will you face the suffering that cannot be avoided? The choice is not between happiness and sadness, it is between distraction and understanding, between illusion and clarity. And perhaps in that clarity lies a freedom that suffering cannot touch.